All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Janicki. I'm Director of Marketing here at TriStar. I'm joined by Anthony Garner. He's a virtual pre-sales specialist for PTC. Just going to give a moment here for a couple more people to jump in here. He's going to give a presentation on kind of the importance of change management and how it allows you to just sort of make dynamic, fast-paced changes kind of throughout your whole product development cycle. If you have any questions, just feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll try to answer them at the end of the presentation. And you'll notice that there is a handout if you want to take a look at that. Everyone who registered will receive a copy of this. And then after about an hour or so, this presentation will be available on demand. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Anthony take it away.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Anthony Garner. I am a pre-sales technical specialist here at the Virtual Center of Excellence for PTC. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be going over a brief PowerPoint presentation, then we're going to do a demonstration of the actual tool, and then we're just going to go over the value of what you've seen today at the end for that. And of course, any questions will be answered at the end. So first thing here is we have our PowerPoint presentation. Let me just make sure I'm selecting here so we can go down. So first thing I wanted to go over is just some of the challenges we've seen for our clients that actually brings them to the necessity of change management. So one of the big ones is that the way that the changes are currently being processed is a very slow and efficient process. It requires a lot of steps, a lot of bureaucratic input, and a lot of duplication and reduplication of work, and it makes it a very slow and ultimately ineffective and inefficient process. And ultimately, there is a difficulty for identifying the data that ultimately does require changes. So it's not just simply the CAD documentation that sometimes requires change, but it's also any related documentation, any sort of information that's ultimately going into the ultimate process. Because of course, if you're changing one thing, you don't necessarily have visibility into everything that's going to be affected by that change. And there's just a general lack of visibility towards the change status and data. So depending on what sort of platform you're using in order to manage these changes, and if people don't have access, don't have the rights to access that information, they're kind of left in the dark about what's currently being changed. And it can come to pass where the thing that's being changed does cause changes further downstream, and they don't have any idea when or why that's actually happening. And the last big challenge is there is a general out of sync as far as the ERP and the MES systems are concerned between engineering for when these changes happen. So within the engineering, within the design phase, something changes and it's not really apparent to your ERP or MES system, which is causing that disconnect and it's causing a lot of unnecessary rework. And just go into some of the implications of these challenges when they aren't addressed properly. One is an immature change management strategy leads to a lack of alignment due to poorly understood in-process changes. There's going to be a delay due to multiple systems of record. So if you are saving your information on multiple systems, what's ultimately going to be occurring is you have different essentially branches. And when those branches don't line up, you don't really have a good idea of what's the thing you should be ultimately working on. And with all this, there's going to be an increased scrap and lower quality due to these poorly understood changes, which ultimately at the end of the day cost industries money. So the ultimate solution to this is of the change management abilities within Windchill. So within Windchill, it's going to be a scalable and tailorable change process. This can scale from 1 to 1,000 products within your system as necessary, and it is ultimately tailorable to your business needs. And it will provide enterprise visibility to that change status and data. So anyone who has access to this product that you're changing within Windchill has access to view the change notice and the problem request right there within Windchill. They don't have to go through a separate system in order to be able to view that. And you'll have full data traceability. You know why something's changed, when it's changed, and ultimately what's the actual cause and effects of this, all the way from the whiteboarding stage of ideation down to the actual final selling and producing of that product. And we're just going to go over the capabilities. And what I mean by capabilities is I'm just going to go through the overall change process philosophy that we're going through within Windchill. And this is kind of going to be the skeleton of the demonstration that I'm going to be giving to you for today. So first, a optional step that we see a lot of industries, but it's ultimately going to be a step that I'm going through for my presentation is the problem report that's going to capture an issue or opportunity, or the deviation or waiver, where you're going to propose a temporary change that can be easily switched back from. And from there, after you've brought in your problem report or your deviation waiver, that's where you're going to get your change request, where you're going to go through the evaluation of that that problem report or deviation waiver to see what its actual technical and business justifications are. And that's where you start to plan for your minor and major changes and ultimately put your review board into effect. And finally, after you've gone through your change request process, that's where you go to your change notice, and that's where you're actually putting into effect those changes that you've ultimately been planning from them. And as your change notice gets closed out, that's going to close out your change request, and from your change request, it's going to go back down to your problem report. Okay, and of course, these are ultimately two ways you can actually do this. This does provide the ability to do a simplified oversight process, or if you want to get down to the full nitty gritty and make sure everyone's 100% on point, you can do the full change review board, change implication board review process. Okay, so let me just switch over to our demonstration for today. And here we have like the general splash screen of Windchill. This is what you're going to come to whenever you first initialize and log into Windchill. I'm currently logged into the data design engineer, and because I'm logged in as that specific persona, he does have specific abilities and specific rights within Windchill system. And the one thing I will make sure you take notice of is the My Tasks up here. So as I go through this process, various change request and change process tasks will be assigned to both me as data design engineer and a little bit later as Pat, the product manager, who's another persona I'm going to be logged into. So all of the changes and change request tasks that are going to be pushed down, they're going to show up here in My Tasks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to the data that we're going to be working on for today's presentation. And that's just going to be this front wheel assembly of this CAD assembly that we have right here. So I'm just going to take a second to go through Windchill Structure page, which is where we manage our built out bill of information. And this is where our WT parts come in, which are essentially bins to collect all of the information that relates to this product, and not simply just the CAD information, but also any sort of documents that are related to this, but also specifically for this, are the problem report and the actual change request data. We have the ability to roll those up into our WT part to be viewable from here. So I'm just going to navigate directly to that brake assembly WT part. And as you can see, we have up here our tabs for our details, our related objects, and our changes. We're going to be going to our changes tabs for this specific one. And this is where we're going to see our initial first step, our problem report about this specific brake assembly. So we're just going to dive deeper into that to take a closer look and just take a look at our attachments. So within the problem reports under this WT part for Windchill, we can see we have the ability to attach any information that we think is supposed to be pertinent. So if the change or the problem report we're bringing in is from the process of, say, doing some sort of simulation analysis, we can attach that simulation results via either Excel or some other means directly to our problem report for anyone who has access to this WT part to take a bit closer look at. And as you can see, we currently have a URL and a PDF under here as our attachments. And if we navigate down to our associated annotations, these are visualizations that we've created with CreoView Lite. And CreoView Lite is our lightweight CAD agnostic representation and annotation tool that comes free with every seat of Windchill. So to make this annotation, I didn't need to use the actual CAD authoring tool that ultimately generated it. I can just download this from Windchill into CreoView Lite and make any sort of annotations that I need. And this ultimately empowers everyone within the enterprise to collaborate on these changes without the need for that specific authoring tool. So we're just going to open this up in CreoView just to take a closer look at it. And as we can see, we have that annotation that's been generated by someone else saying that this area will get extremely hot while breaking into the high speed. So that's ultimately our problem. So that's where we're going to be moving on from that point on. And if we take a closer look down here, we can also see we have our affected objects. So anything that this specific problem report or implementing this problem report will affect, that's where we're going to see those affected objects downstream. And as we can see here, if we take a look towards that third column, all of our objects within Windchill are completely and totally version controlled. So if I were to check out any of this information, which simply means I'm taking this upon myself to make any changes to it and no one else can make changes to it, when I check that object back in, that's when the version number will iterate as necessary. And here we have our associated process objects and our associated reference objects. So now we're just going to navigate to the change request that exists outstanding for the specific problem report. And as we take a look at our annotations, we see we have the ability to save different annotations specifically for a problem report or a change request. Both of these problem reports and change requests are assets under that WT part within Windchill, but they can be two separate annotations representing multiple things as necessary. So as we see, we have a separate annotation here for reduce break disk to redesign break disk to reduce that heat generation. Okay. As we can see here, we have the more affected objects from our specific change request and also more of our affected end items as we see necessary. And under here, we can see more of our associated process objects. So from here, if I needed to, I can navigate backwards to our problem report, which we initially got here first, or I can navigate to the actual change request, which is the ultimate implementation of this plan. So as we see here, this is our brake pad are overheating. This is our change notice. This is specifically when we're going to be implementing those changes as we need to. And if we come under here to our process tab, this is where we're going to see all the team members that have a hand in essentially this ultimate change request process. And this is ultimately editable and configurable to whatever you need it to be. And you can build this ultimately entirely from scratch if necessary, or you can have a lot of these built out automatically. And here we can actually see the overall workflow for this entire change process. And I know this does seem complicated, but one thing to keep in mind is that pretty much all of these, not all of them, but a lot of these components have been generated automatically in the background by Windchill through the actual steps of creating this change notice and change request. I'm just going to scroll through so you can see the entirety. This is very, very thorough, and you can basically follow it from point A to point B to see what's ultimately going on. Okay, so now that we have our visibility into our problem report to our change notice, and our change notice to our change request, this is where we can take a look at our implementation plan. And these are essentially the step-by-step things that we're going to do to implement this change. So our current problem is the brake disc is overheating at high speeds. And we're going to come into this a little bit in the middle of this because we can see that from a couple of these, the states have already been resolved by data design engineer. So ultimately, the next step will be to make an implementation. But before that, we're going to take a look at this update CAD model brake assembly task within our implementation plan. Yep. And if we take a look at our affecting resulting objects specifically from this task, we get a nice before and after where our affected objects are essentially the objects before we implementing this change, and the resulting objects are essentially the objects that exist after we take a look at this change. So what we're going to do now is we're going to navigate directly to our assembly, and we're going to do a textual comparison between our two CAD documents. So this is comparing the version before this change is taken into place and the version after this. And a little bit later in this demonstration, I want to show you a full board-to-board, CAD-to-CAD comparison as opposed to just this short summation comparison. Okay, so now we're just going to hit close, and now we're going to navigate directly to the new assembly that was generated from this change task. We're going to open that up in Creo Parametric. Okay, and as we can see, there has been a change made to this disk in order to solve the problem we were looking at before. So we see that we have these slots here in order to try to assist with that convective heating problem. And now we're just in the process of ultimately reviewing those changes. So taking a good look at it under Creo Parametric, seems okay as far as we can see. And this is where we're going to go back to home as data design engineer. And under my task, we're going to see we have that complete change notice task. So this is essentially the change notice task has been assigned to me as data design engineer for me to take a closer look at. So I'm just going to open up my task assistant, which is just a handy call out to allow me to have quick access to information as I need to, or just simply continue to task with completion. And if we come down here, we're going to see again our affected objects and all of our resulting objects from this ultimate change. So we take a closer look at our affected objects, and we come to our actions. And now we're going to open this up in our manufacturing associated part structure browser. So the last part of our implementation plan, and we'll be able to see that wasn't actually implemented, was to essentially pass this change all the way up to our most current bill of material. So This, as it currently exists, is more or less a actual design attempt, and it's for us as data design engineer to push this change into our bill of material for it to actually be a part of our actual most up-to-date bill of material. So all we're going to do with our comparison here is simply select the equivalent object. So whatever exists within this current assembly, we're just going to select its equivalent object in that previous design version. Okay, and now we're just going to select the remaining components that ultimately need updated, and then we're just going to right click and we're just going to update to our current upstream equivalent object. Okay. So now we can see between our left and our right, they are now equivalent. We have taken the design change that we've made and we've now pushed that to its actual part. So now we are more clear to go and look into the actual review of this process before we go into our effectivity and the ultimate releasing this from its in-work state to its release state. So now, because I've checked this out and I'm the only one that working on it, this is where I can check it back in, and this is where we can see the actual version start to increase as we start working on this. And even with our new version of this object, we will have continuous access to any previous versions. So if we need to come back and make any sort of reuse for any previous versions, or we decide a little bit late in the game that those steps that we were doing back in A1 is a little bit better than what we were doing in A15, we can go back and explore that route a little bit further. So now that we've completed our final change notice task, which is simply updating that BOM to its break assembly, we're just going to write a comment in order to do good bookkeeping. So anyone who has view of this change activity will have view of this comment, so they'll know exactly what's going on. So I'm just going to type in our BOM has been updated, and we're going to complete that task. So now we're just going to switch gears here. So I was previously data design engineer. Now I'm going to log into Windchill as Pat the product manager. Pat the product manager was assigned as the reviewer for a lot of data design engineers' work in our current implementation plan. Okay. So now, as we can see under my task, I do have specific tasks for Pat the product manager. One of them is to review that change notice task that we just did as data design engineer. And of course, in regular industry, this is when we take that step forward to actually look at some of the CAD models, either through Creo View or if we have a seat of Creo Parametric. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to write in the note for the task compilation and just move this complete task. Okay, just going to write great job with a nice exclamation point. And then we're just going to move to completing this task. And from our completed task, this is where we're also going to generate from that completed task our auditing task within Pat the Product Manager. So now we're just going to come here and we're going to accept that audit change task. And this is where we're going to define when these changes are going to go into effect, and we're going to move all of these products from their current in-work state to their release state. So we come to our actions. This is where we can open from our task assistant, which is going to be what we are going to be using to ultimately complete most of these tasks. And as you can see, we now have that red box telling us to go to latest because we are currently no longer working on the latest version because we have made those changes. And if you actually take a look at the visualization we're looking at, we can see that the brake panel does not have those holes that we made to actually fix our problem in the first place. So if we simply just click that go to latest button, we can see that we now are working on OEM B.1, B for our revision, and 1 is our first iteration of that revision, so that's our latest version. And if we come down to our changes, this is where we're going to see our resulting change notice specifically from this. Okay, now we're just going to dive a little bit deeper into that change notice. Okay. And we're going to go back to our implementation plan. As we can see, we now have all of our actions within this implementation plan resolved. So we've gone through the entire change process. Now all that's left is to set like when do these changes actually going into effect and to move these from their current in-work status to their resolve status. Good. So we're just going to navigate really quickly to our affected resulting objects. And we're just going to select 3 of these WT parts to define when these changes are ultimately going to be going into effect. If we wanted them to go to an effect immediately, all we would need to do is basically take the date of today and make it exact, so those effects will go in immediately. But we're just going to set it to an arbitrary date for our presentation here for when we want these changes to ultimately go into effect. Just going to take a second to name that for all of our ranges here. And finally, this last break assembly, just set the effective date. Of course, these are things that Pat has the power to do under his rights within the Windchill system. If we don't declare Pat has this ability, Pat can't be doing this. Okay, so now we have set the effective date for all of these. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to set the state for all of our objects within our assembly here. So as you can see from our targets, from the current states that we have here, we have some that are released with some that are currently in work. Those in work items were the ones that we were working on. But we're just going to select everything within our assembly, and we're going to select our target state to be all of these are released. So now that all of ours have been released, we can go ahead and hit OK. And now we can simply go to from our audit change notice to basically just complete this task off. So we've gone straight from our initial problem report to our change notice to our change request. And now we're pushing it from our change request so that it's back in the rotation, regular rotation of all of our products within our Windchill system. So now we're just going to complete task. And the last thing I want to show you for our demonstration here is just to do that bore to bore, CAD to CAD comparison I was telling you about before. So we come back to our structure tab. We can compare the part structure directly to each other. So I'm just going to compare our latest design version to a baseline version. Okay. And as we come here, we can see our comparison. We can see the part structure comparison between the two. Anything that's highlighted in blue represents a difference between the baseline version to our left and our most current version to our right. And as you can take a closer look here, we can see that there are differences within our visualization. And within that center column, we can also see a couple logos designating what type of differences those ultimately are, whether they're child differences or just simple non-existing parts that currently don't exist anymore within our current assembly. Okay, so that is our demonstration. So lastly, I'm going to just simply go over the value of change management and just to summarize it, and just a summarization. So one is you're going to have fast and more accurate response to internal market pressures. As you can see, like everything I've done within Windchill and that entire change process took less than 15 minutes. So it will be a negligible amount of time for when you notice a problem needs to be done and when you can need to start to access that if you need to. You have the ability to add in layers of complexity as you need to for whatever your ultimate business need is. And it's going to be an increased change management efficiency. You'll be able to configure a repeatable process. You're going to be organized, you're align your organization around these issues, priorities, and plans. There's no longer a case of people being in the dark when they shouldn't be. And it's going to be a traceability from the issue to its resolution. So you'll have complete visibility for the entirety of your enterprise if necessary, from the beginning ideation steps to the final final release states. And there's going to be an increase of product quality, and there's going to be enterprise availability to the cross-discipline change process. So as you can see, I was working as both Pat, the product manager, and as Dave, the design engineer. And you can extend that even further to either your marketing department, your upper executive level. If there are people who are very hands-on, everyone who needs to be viewing these products and projects will have visibility into that. And that goes doubly for anyone who you want to be as your customer or supply participation within this ultimate process. So that is the sum totality of my demonstration for today. My demonstration and my presentation for today.
Very good. That was great. I'll hold one moment for questions. And it doesn't look like we have any. There is a lot more information out there on change management. Like I said, I did include a data sheet, but feel free to visit us at tristar.com. We've got sales support available. It does look like we have one question here. You might be able to answer this for me. Can we customize the revision designation from A1, A2, B2 to something else?
Yes, you can. That goes a little bit more into kind of the back end of Windchill. I'm pretty sure you can't do that within like the Windchill system itself, but towards the actual server side of it, you can definitely customize that to not just be A1 or B1. You can customize that to whatever convention you ultimately need to.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if there's any follow-up questions. All right, looks like that is it. Anthony, again, thank you. Everyone else, feel free again to visit us online at tristar.com or give us a call. And have a great rest of your morning.
You as well. And Alex, I'll probably be sending you a follow-up email probably right after our presentation here.
Excellent. All right,
Okay.
take care, everyone.